All right, welcome to the Idiot Workbench. Today we have my, I guess 2-season old build, which is a Mugen Mbx8r short course truck conversion. I had run a 410.3 Techno in the past and just could not get past the terrible jumping manners that it had. So I traded that in and bought a used TLR SCTE 3.0, and that was a pretty great handling truck overall. I was pretty happy with it. However, I hated working on it. All the mixed hardware between standard and metric bits and all the other kind of things just aggravated me while we're tinkering on it. Plus, you know, I have a fleet of other Mugen vehicles. So, kind of made sense to streamline everything and create a Mugen short course truck, since I was running short course truck class a lot in my local tracks. So, with the help of a couple guys online who'd already done this, and then just some good old fashioned, hillbilly engineering and creativity, I came up with this guy. So the idea was that I wanted to make it totally rural legal. Have a 2S power system. Everything's stripped out of it currently. It's just down to a roller. But it wasn't that hard of a build. I'm going to go ahead and post, I guess just picture all these part numbers right here. You could pause and screenshot, or, just write down everything, or whatever have you. I don't have fancy editing programs, nor do I have time or care to do any editing. So this is what we're doing. The good old-fashioned Sharpie on a stainless steel board. But I'm going to go over pretty much a how-to on how to build one of these things. Okay, starting at the chassis. This is originally a Mugen Mbx8r buggy. I wanted that because it has all the updated differentials and whatever upgrades that the R got as opposed to the 8. I believe the R also got emulsion shock caps and some other things like that. So, in my opinion, it just made sense to start with the R. It was the newest car. Some people say that the R split battery tray does not work super great for a full-length stick pack and the battery falls out. I have not had any kind of bad experience with that. Batteries always stayed in place. I use one of the long, 2S stick packs. Not this one per se, but this style. Never had any batteries flying out, and I've, been in a couple altercations, as is normal with short course racing. So, normal 8R chassis. The key is that you need to have these narrower 8R C and D blocks. The big change from the 8 to the 8R was that they went to a narrow pivot in the rear with long arms. Okay? You can see here I have an original 8 compared to an 8R arm. The 8R arm is approximately 5 millimeters wider per side of an arm. To get to rural legal short course length, or width, you need to shave approximately 10 millimeters off the e-buggy all the way around. So to do that in the rear, you run the narrower 8R C and D blocks, and then you run the shorter original 8 arms. That sucks the rear of the truck in pretty good. Then you just obviously, turn in your turnbuckles to situate your camber to wherever you want it. That is no big deal. The front is a little more tricky, but you don't really need to buy anything. These are still the original 8R or 8 upper and lower control arms. There's no differences to my knowledge. But since it's a pillow ball car, they make it pretty simple to modify. All you really need to do is, trim 5 millimeters off these arms, top and bottom. I did it with a belt sander, and I think I eventually went to a bandsaw for a cleaner, easier cut. There's a lot of ways you can cut these. You could do a Dremel. I just kind of eyeballed it. you know, try to make a nice like razor blade cut at exactly 5 millimeters all the way around, top and bottom, front and back of the arm, and then kind of grind down to suit. Once you do that, you'll have your even 5 millimeters off per side. You're then left with the issue of the pillow balls themselves will now be too long. You can see, obviously, this will no longer screw into there. It's going to bottom out, or it's going to punch through the arm itself, which I didn't want to do that. I thought it was going to make it weak. So I actually took my big industrial belt sander and also took 5 millimeters off of these pillow balls, all 4 of them, left and right. And then after you know, shorten up your steering links and everything, you have your front end kind of width problem situated. The big issue at that point is you're now left with a car that's 5 millimeters shorter on every side, but your axles no longer work. They are 5 millimeters too wide at that point. So, you know, the axles will be bottomed out in the cups, and, you know, you'd have some really unhappy driveline parts. So, the solution for that is I have no idea how they figured this out. Some guy online figured out that the Mugen Mbx8r, which I guess is some sort of GT car, touring car. I'm not familiar with their onward line. I have no idea what year range this thing's from. But this dog bone axle, E2222222 fits perfectly in here. It is the exact width dog bone that you need. You can basically just take the dog bone, use the original, you know, Mugen buggy out drives, or the rest of the, you know, axle shaft. You basically pull your stock axles apart, take the out drive part off, stick it on these dog bones, Frankenstein it together, all split together like it was meant to. And then before you know it, boom, you got yourself a Mugen short course truck, as far as length and width wise. The bumpers and body mounts, that is all Techno 410.3 stuff. The 2.0 stuff does not fit as well on this chassis. I guess with the battery tray, you also need to run the, you know, the wider of the 2 factory supplied battery straps, as if you're running a 4S LiPo, I think. The long one, not necessarily the shorty. I can't recall. It's one of the 2 that comes with the kit. I think I was saying something earlier about the battery tray being an issue. If you start with an 8 chassis that has the 1-piece solid battery tray, like this, then allegedly that will work better and have a, you know, more stable hold of the battery. However, I do not have one of those at the time, so I used what I had. So we have this. Seems to work fine. I have no issues with it. Moving on. Body posts. Techno 410.3. The carbon shock towers are definitely not necessary. I just thought they look cool, and that's why I have them. I don't think they make any kind of positive difference in the build. There's no significant weight loss, really. They just look neat. But the body posts are essentially, you know, stock 410.3 body posts that are trimmed. You kind of just gotta eyeball them up, and I had to, you know, cut out here with a razor knife so it sits correctly on the tower itself. Focus, baby. But you had to do some trimming in here. I also had to elongate the holes on the backside of the shock tower, so where you could run your shock bolt through, essentially. So that was, you know, just literally took a drill and hogged it out. It wasn't anything crazy, or a Dremel or whatever you have. I did make a hole in the shock tower to run a little, you know, 2.5 millimeter bolt to retain the 410.3 shock towers, or I'm sorry, body posts to the shock towers. Just thought it was a nice little feature. Doesn't hurt anything. you know, retains those things if you do have the shocks pulled off to make an adjustment. I literally have put the shocks in this orientation and have not changed them the entire time I've ran the truck at a bunch of different tracks. I think you'd probably need to hog at the body mounts some more if you wanted to have multiple shock mount positions for the upper shock mount. I think that's it for the body post. Pretty self-explanatory. Just do some dremeling and trimming as you see fit. Pick your appropriate, you know, little foot mount for whatever body you're running. And that's pretty much it. Factory everything else as far as servo mount and like literally the whole rest of the chassis is great. I ran a 4300 kV regular Tekin short course motor. I ran a Phantom, I guess whatever their 8 scale ESC is, the 2.0, and that was a great unit for this thing. I ran it on 2S. You need to find like any, you know, 2S powered short course truck, you need to find a pretty large size, you know, capacity battery. I think I was running 8400s or 7200 mAh packs to get through a you know, 8-minute main, and that was pretty well good. The bumpers themselves, they are Techno 410.3. The bumper literally bolts through the same holes that the front shock tower to diff mount uses, which makes it pretty easy. I think I had to, you know, pull the bumper a hair to get that to line up, but it worked out great. Bumpers all mounted together as per standard. On the bottom side, I did drill and tap 2 holes into the chassis. So this threads into the chassis, and you know, that works pretty well. I have no real complaints. I wish this front bumper had a little more protection for the A block. I have broken an A block on this truck. So I wish, you know, maybe I can combine or 3D print a different front bumper that would have, you know, a little more coverage on this A block, because it is kind of vulnerable. If you run on a rough track or something with rocks, or you clip a pole or a pipe or something metal in the track, you could definitely break an A block, which I have done. That's pretty well it. This center bolt I did try to drill and tap it into the front diff case. Like, it goes through the A block into the diff case, and it just like always backs itself out whenever you have a significant impact. So not really necessary. I don't really think it does anything, as long as you have the bottom 2 bolts to the chassis, and this is just kind of in there as like a guide almost, and then the 2 front shock tower to you know, diff case or bulkhead, whatever you want to call it. And that seems to be very secure. I haven't had any issues with it. Rear bumper, same kind of thing. The main bumper kind of shock piece bolts to your factory Mugen upper diff case bolts. Same spacing, bolts right on, no modification required. Pretty easy. Bumpers bolted together as per factory. Bottom bumper, I used the holes that hold the D block on with some extended bolts. And yeah, once again, pretty easy button. Not a whole lot to do as far as getting that to work. They're pretty well takes care of the bumper mounts and body mounts. If you've ever done any significant RC customization, I feel like you can handle that. Not necessarily a bolt-on solution, but not hard either. Other modifications to the rear end. There's an issue with these short course wheels. They are, I guess, since they step in on the outside lip down to a 2.2, the inside of the wheel generally has some pretty significant supports on them. These are the DE racing wheels for an SC8, which is like an old 8 scale short course truck that they no longer make. They also run them on the 6S Arma short course truck. I forgot what it's called. But I've talked to DE in the past. They say they have no plans of discontinuing this wheel. However, they will only make it in black. So you're kind of stuck with this as your wheel choice. I think JC has recently come out with a different wheel for the SC8. Now that the 8-scale short course truck thing is kind of coming into fashion again. But they've come out with a different wheel. I've never run those. But these ones have a clearance problem. These inside ribs, you need to basically trim to avoid them from hitting on your, knuckle upper plates back here. I also had to grind down the upper camber arm plastic pieces, just because they are, very close to the inside edge of the wheel, much closer than they are on a buggy wheel. I don't really know why that is, but it just is. Hold on a second. I have a buggy wheel. Some there. All right. Cooperate, baby. All right. So, focus the old camera. Stick the buggy wheel on here. You can see the clearance is pretty great. No real issue. Buggy wheel is much bigger inner diameter than a short course wheel is because of the step down to 2.2 on the outside. Once again, did not want to run buggy rims, wanted to run proper short course wheels. So when you put a short course wheel on, the clearance is significantly less, at least for this wheel style. These are both DE wheels, so I was saying something about the short course wheel. You need to essentially trim down a lot of stuff to get it to fit, or else it won't fit. But, once again, nothing too wild. Grind this down significantly. You also, if you run your hubs in the lower position, you could run the 3-dot plate, which you need to shave off kind of the outside hole. You round this edge over on all 4 of the plates. Once again, for inner wheel clearance. If you run the hub in the upper position for like high grip or to get more rotation out of the rear, then you pretty much are stuck with running the one or 2 dots, which will, essentially shorten this distance, get this down here. I guess you could see, like, there's a difference in the plate. But shorter plate, these are rounded over also. But if you're on the hub in the upper position, you need to run the 1-dot plate. If you're on the hub in the lower position for, more loose dirt or bigger outdoor tracks, honestly, once I switched to the lower position, I've never changed this truck back. It just overall handled better everywhere. I haven't had any kind of reliability issues. Just running the middle hole. It's been great. No issues. That, I believe, wraps it up as far as the build. Like I said, I ran a lot of races with this thing on the East Coast. I ran at Park Lane with it. I ran at Adrenaline RC. I never actually ran Adrenaline's outdoor track with it, I don't think. But I feel like it would have done well. Setup issues as far as, tuning the chassis and suspension compared to a buggy. I kind of thought it would be the same as an e-buggy. Big surprise, it is not the same as an e-buggy at all. Well, at least not as much as I thought it would be. I kind of thought I could just copy and paste my setup from my e-buggy into this thing, and it did not work at all. I had a lot of loose rear end issues, and I chalk it up mostly, I don't know if it's a weight differential, but I think it's just, stupid short course body. What's back here? There's no wing back here. No wing, no downforce. No downforce, no rear grip. So I had a lot of rear end stability issues, especially at the end of streets. Big, long, sweeping corners, you'd always lose the rear. You'd have to drive like on a razor's edge. The thing was very twitchy. Did not handle well with the factory buggy setup. I tried, I guess, the factory diffs, which are, I think, 552. I tried playing with the sway bars, did a bunch of stuff. I ended up kind of looking at techno setups as far as their spring rates and sway bars and everything else. And the one thing that was constant was that the front sway bar and spring package was significantly larger than the rear sway bar and spring package. On like an 8R buggy, I believe the stock front sway bar is a 2.3 and the rear is like a 2.7 or something. During one race day, I ended up just taking the rear bar off completely, and the truck handled significantly better. Like, total game changer, was way more drivable, had a way better rear grip. So, decided to go back to the drawing board, made some radical, setup changes. I went to a big beefy bar on the front. I think the front's actually running the factory rear bar. I want to say it's running a 2.7 or a 2.8 front bar. Rear bar as the front bar. Just some big beefy thing, and that, takes away grip from the front. Makes it harder to roll over, harder to transfer weight. It definitely did not need any more, front end grip to essentially make it twitchy and spin the rear end around. I played with the, kind of caster adjustment with the upper arms. I go back and forth with that a few millimeters, and it kind of, suits the traction of the day to kind of take the twitchiness out of the front end. But yeah, running a super light rear bar. Once again, I think I don't have the diameters with me right now, but I want to say I pretty much swapped. Overall setup is very different from the buggy. You need to basically take away a whole bunch of grip from the front end, because now that you have no downforce from the buggy wing or extra buggy weight of the power system, you basically got to lighten up the rear suspension and stiffen up the front suspension. Trying to take away some grip from the front, give it to the rear to add to the overall stability of the truck. Diffs, I also found you cannot use any kind of buggy setup. It just doesn't seem to work. You need to just thicken up everything. I talked to a couple of techno short course truck drivers and looked at a bunch of setup sheets online and found everybody was running significantly heavier fluids all the way around, just to numb out the steering, essentially, is what I can gather, than the regular buggy, which originally was like 5.52, but a lot of people run 10.10.7, 7.75, depending on temperature and grip level and everything else like that. For the most part, running medium grip outdoor, I've settled on kind of this, which is 12 in the front diff, 15 in the center, and 10 in the rear. And I will vary the center diff depending on the grip of the day, but I leave the front and the rear diff pretty much standard at that. This is my sway bar setup, 2.7 millimeter in the front, 2.3 millimeter in the rear. Shock oils are 550 CST front, 500 CST rear, go up and down. Generally 50 CST depending on the temperature. These are the springs, 75 by 9.25 winds, essentially, for the front. So it's a significantly stiffer spring than the factory. And then 86 mil by 11 wind for the rear. So significantly softer from a factory Mbx8r spring. The piston setup is it's the MIP bypass system with basically the Drake piston setup. So it's a 6-hole piston. I think it's 6 by 1.4 in the front, and it's split 6 by 1.4 and 3 by 1.4 and 3 by 1.5 in the rear. Once again, soften the rear up. But with all those changes, the thing handles way freaking better outside. Jumps really nice, soaks up all the chop, all the bumps, does rollers nice, Couldn't ask for anything more. It just soaks up everything. It's great. I've won a lot of races with this truck. Park Lane, I've won a lot of races with it. Pit Stop, won a lot of races. It's fast. Most time it turns basically B-class buggy times on most tracks I run it at. But yeah, so far it's my favorite SCT build. If you're looking to do one yourself, this should give you a pretty good guide. And hope to see more of these things out there. Good luck and happy racing.